like it. You want a podcast like it? Podcast like it's 1999. Podcast like it. Just podcast like it. Podcast like it's 1999. Podcast like it. You want a podcast like it's 1999.
Hello and welcome to Podcast Like It's 1999, the podcast where we talk about the films of 1999. Asleep on the front seat of our truck on the beach here in 2021. I'm one of your hosts, Kenny Nybar.
And I'm Phyllis Gove.
And with us today is TV writer and friend of the pod, Adam Karp. Thank you for coming on our podcast to talk about Minus Man.
Yeah, don't forget the.
Yeah, no, I'm going to stick to Minus Man. It's much cleaner. So, Minus Man is a film from 1999 you may not have heard of, starring Owen Wilson, large, movie. He's such a big movie star that we're even going to do our top 5 Owen Wilson films.
We are.
It's written and directed by the man who wrote Blade Runner. And he used all of his capital 17 years later to make The Minus Man. Got a cast of nothing but
all-stars.
Excellent cast. Yeah. Top-rate cast. And made a movie that exists. And I mean that in the most neutral way.
The most literal way?
That's it. It is 1 hour and 45 minutes of sound and audio filling up your eyes and ears.
Well, video and audio, but sound and audio is the same.
Not if you were sleeping for part of it. But which I was. From 58 minutes to hour 12, I was asleep and had to go back. But I missed the part in the house with the woman with the lightning blue eyes and her art.
Her paintings? Is that
her paintings?
Yeah.
But it's The Minus Man. So
everyone's favorite
The Minus
movie.
Man.
Yeah.
Adam, why did you knock on our doors? Why did you barrel down? Why did you barrel down the gates?
I kicked in that door.
Why did you kick in that door? Why did you kick in that door? Why did you stick your head in and go, it's Minus Man time? We're like, huh?
3 years ago? When did you start this podcast, Phil?
3 years ago.
3 years ago? And there was the entire 1999 slate was virgin territory, and I was like, I'll do Minus Man.
I mean, it sounds like he's joking, but truly, I remember talking with Adam shortly after we started this podcast, and he was talking about how he was listening to it and he was enjoying it, and I was very thankful for him taking the time to listen to our podcast. And he was like, I kind of have a history with The Minus Man if you ever need anybody to come on for it. And I was like, The Minus Man's a movie? I was like, okay.
Yeah,
and then I did a little bit.
The past 3 years, I've been knocking on your door periodically, being like, "You didn't assign it to someone else, did you?"
There was never anyone else that raised their hand for this movie. Just to be very clear, but it was sort of a movie that once you brought it up, I have to be honest with you, Adam. I mean, as I've said before, I worked in many video stores, and when he said The Minus Man, I was like, wait a second, I kind of have an inkling of remembering that this might have been a movie. I could kind of see the box art.
It is a very 99 indie movie.
100%.
As far as indie movies are concerned, this feels like one.
Oh, 100%. I mean, Kenny and I texted a little bit about this, but and obviously we started the podcast this way as well, but this is a stacked bench of pretty much heavy hitters. I mean, Mercedes Ruehl has an Academy Award. Brian Cox has obviously been in a million things. Janine Garofalo will obviously talk about how much we love Janine Garofalo, but it's just so I guess the question that I have, and I know that Adam, you were somewhat involved in the making of this film in some.
I don't want to go that far. What I will say is
you were around the people that were. Yeah,
and I did intern in post-production sound on it.
Okay.
But it was more of me walking in the door and being like, hey, I'm interested in this, and they let me sit there.
Sure.
I was, in 1999, I grew up in Paramus, New Jersey, about 9 miles out of New York City. I was splitting my time between the sneaking in the back door of Cineplex Odeon on Route 4 And that summer, I was living in New York on my own at basically 16 years old, interning at the shooting gallery. And it was my first job in Hollywood. They produced this movie, and I believe this came out that September or October.
Yeah, it was September 10th, yeah.
Yeah, so I first saw this movie with a VHS that I stole from work and brought home that night.
It's totally worth it, right? I mean, you must have just been like,
yes,
yeah.
But it's funny because it holds a real place in my heart because of the fact that it's one of, if not the very first thing I worked on in any way. I have no creative ownership of any kind of it.
Of course, yeah.
But you know,
I think we all have that though, right? I mean, I think that we all have that first sort of, you're sort of in the door, you know what I mean? And you're kind of like, and I understand why this movie might hold, a little bit of a soft spot in your heart, I would assume, Adam, if nothing else, to be a part of it.
Yeah. And by the way, I haven't watched it since then until 2 days ago.
Sure.
And we're going to get into our, where do we rank this thing, but that'll be fun. I feel like in many ways I was very young in 1999, even though I had already started working in entertainment. I think I was emotionally young and I think I was intellectually young. I'm sure I still am. But like, I feel like I didn't understand this movie at all at that time. I'm not 100% sure I understand it now, but I thought I understood it then.
This movie has... Sorry, go ahead, Kenny. Yeah,
I want to get into that, what you just said.
Yeah.
In a second. So I'm going to table that, but I want to... a bit of a word of warning to our audience.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to read directly from the Wikipedia page for this. So this is about the marketing of the movie.
Are you going to talk about the trailer?
Yes.
It is the greatest trailer in history.
I don't think this is the theatrical trailer. I think this is a commercial or something. I'm not sure, but it says, in addition to the tagline, quote unquote, "Don't see it alone unless you like talking to yourself." One trailer for the film showed a couple discussing the film as they left the theater. Their conversation takes them from place to place all over the city until the man marvels how beautiful the sunrise is. The woman realizes she is late to work and rushes to her job as a lifeguard, where two people are floating dead in the pool. The ad ends with the tagline, "Careful, you can talk about it for hours." My point being, guys, this is going to go on for a long time. Because if there's anybody who knows how to talk about movies for hours, it's the boys from Podcast Night like it's 1999. That being said, we have no fucking idea what to talk about with this movie. This was a movie that was marketed as, what a conversation starter. You'll be talking about this all night until you go to your lifeguard job and people died because of your negligence, because you were so caught up in the minus, man. I don't know what it's about. So what I wonder, the way I'm tying this into what you said, Adam, is basically like, do you think this movie is purposely opaque to the point where there actually isn't anything there that is decipherable? All it is these little moments that are like, did that mean something? Did that mean something? What was going on here? What was going on there? Without any backbone. That's my takeaway. But hey, look, I might be totally wrong. There might be something brilliant in here. It got kind of good reviews.
It does feel like it has the air of saying something, right?
Yes.
Like you're watching it and you're sort of like, so this is a question I'm going to posit to you as well, Adam, so you can sort of take both of these questions and run with it. But I watched scenes of this film and thought to myself, is there tension here or is this incompetence?
No, I mean, I feel like, you could lift 35 minutes out of this movie just by cutting dead air. And you have actually a pretty tight, maybe interesting movie.
Yeah.
But I think I'm not sure I know the answer to any of these questions. My feeling is that it's compelling to talk about if you want to go down the road of what is he thinking and why is he motivated?
Yeah.
Right? Like, it doesn't seem like he has much motivation, and we haven't really given a summary of what this movie is yet. But,
I was going to say, maybe...
Yeah, let me give a synopsis.
A synopsis.
Yeah,
And maybe
have you
we should
seen
do a
Dexter?
little...
Sorry, go on.
Maybe we should do a little well, I mean, that's Dexter's fault, right?
Yeah.
But maybe we should do a little walking through this movie, a little more beat by beat than we normally do. Not because it requires such close reading, but maybe we will figure something out if we go through chronologically.
So I'll give a little bit of context here. Synopsis: aimless van Surgit. Okay, like can we just? I also just need to say none of the names are names of people in this movie.
Is it Sergey?
It might be Sergey. All I know is that the writer director of this film's name is Hampton Fancher, which sounds like a name from a Hampton Fancher movie. That's not actually a name either. But anyway, so Van Sergey, possibly played by Owen Wilson, takes a bizarre turn in life and becomes a serial killer, tracking down the miserable and self-destructive and those who otherwise seem willing to die. His first victim is wretched junkie Casper, played by Sheryl Crow. After disposing of her body, Van rents a room from turbulent couple Jane and Doug, played by Mercedes Ruehl and Brian Cox. From there, Van plots his murders, gets work at the postal office, and falls deeper and deeper into a psychotic haze. The Minus Man opened on September 10th, 1999 against Stigmata, The Sixth Sense, and A Stir of Echoes. I mean, 3 movies that this movie should not be going up against.
Interesting.
Right? Like, they're all
they should go up against each other.
Exactly. They're all splitting up that audience.
Stop it, guys.
Here's the thing.
Makes no
This
sense.
movie's not in the same theaters that those movies are in.
This is true because it opens with $40,000 and goes on to make $370,000. So like this movie didn't really land on a lot of screens.
In the Angelica in New York, right? It's not.
Right.
It's not in your local movie theater. It's only in indie houses, and that's one of the interesting things. Is it has a premise that feels like nowadays would be like an elevated indie premise in some way, or maybe a mainstream indie premise. But it was a truly like indie film. I mean, I remember watching this in the Angelica in New York City, which for anybody who's never been to the Angelica, I don't even know if it exists anymore.
You can't go anymore. It is closed.
It is closed. But like this was a independent movie theater in which all the movie screens were subterranean in New York City.
Yeah.
It's right next to the subway stop. It is like right next to the subway stop.
Yeah.
And you can hear the subway every 8 minutes while watching the movie.
That's pretty great. That's kind of great.
I mean, so
it's not that great.
I saw the Blair Witch Project down there, and every 8 minutes a subway rolls through.
Before we go into the movie, did you guys happen to read Hampton Fancher's Wikipedia by any chance?
No.
All right. So let's play a little bit of a game.
Do you want me to just do this critics thing first, or do you want to get into the review section?
Yes. No, I'll do Hampton Fancher after.
So The Minus Man is 58% on Rotten Tomatoes from critics, 46% from audiences. Feels about right. Roger Ebert, in his 3-star review, called it a psychological thriller of uncommon power, maybe because it's so quiet and devious. LA Times said it is above all such an unsettling experience you find yourself still talking about well after the lights have gone up. And Andrew Saras of the New York Observer said it's a surging undercurrent of black comedy drives out to sea without ever breaking to the surface with glib psychological or sociological explanations. We cannot laugh out loud, nor can we feel any grief. Sarah singles out Garofalo's performance as incandescent, one of the most enticing, endearing female movie characters in recent years, witty, bubbly, but at the same time lonely and terrified of rejection.
Yeah, I liked her too, but come on, Andrew. Right.
I mean, it's crazy. Let's do some Hampton Fancher.
Let's play the Hampton Fancher game.
Everyone's favorite game.
Where do you think Hampton Fancher was born?
Oh boy, Maine.
Not Hamptons.
What's that? Did you guess not the Hamptons? All right, Maine was your guess, and what would you say, Adam?
I'm gonna go with like Iowa.
He was born in East Los Angeles.
Oh boy!
Never would have seen that coming.
Yeah,
I would have guessed the UK with a name like Hampton Fancher. Hampton Fancher ran away from home at the age of 15 So where did he go?
Yeah. Where'd he go?
West Los Angeles?
Spain, sure.
To become a flamenco dancer.
Stop it. Stop
He renamed himself Mario Montejo and went by Mario Montejo for years. Now he is Mexican. So
Okay.
it's not quite the egregious cultural thievery
appropriation
that it sounds like.
Hampton Fancher is not a particularly Mexican or Spanish sounding name.
His father appears to be a Fancher. Look at a Fancher
of the Fanchers,
and his mother is Mexican Danish. Now the thing about Hampton Fancher is that really does surprise me. Is it does seem like Hampton Fancher is the main reason that Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep became Blade Runner. Now that's a very old novel or short story from the 60s, and it wasn't made into a movie until the 80s. It wasn't on anyone's radar either.
Nope.
So he is the one who sought those rights for years and years and years. He wasn't able to get them, and finally he wrote, according to this, he wrote the first draft, and Ridley Scott didn't like it. He tried to rewrite the draft and was so slow that the crew called him Happen Faster, which is not that clever. And then it became
It's
Blade
not that
Runner.
clever.
Somehow which I don't even really understand, they let him go write the new one. I don't know why. I mean, he did it with Michael Green, who is an A+ writer, so I assume Michael Green had a pretty big hand in this. But yeah, it's an interesting kind of story. He really kind of feels like this guy who did this one kind of amazing thing for humanity, and kind of Hampton Fancher his way into obscurity after that.
Yeah. I want him to make a movie about being a flamenco dancer, quite frankly. I mean, it's like, what a story.
Mario Monte, 15.
So
that's one of those like almost famous stories that you're almost like, nah, it couldn't have happened like that.
Yeah. I guess the question, I guess Hampton's really the only one who can answer this for us, but that's a really long time to capitalize on your, to cash your blank check.
Your blank check.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing for 17 years? I mean, I can only assume that he was doing rewrites and probably getting paid to, what have you, right here and there. I mean, I'm assuming.
He also has an acting resume that appears to be like as long as your arm. So of just sort of guest spots on anything you've ever heard of. So and a lot of things you haven't heard of. But
all before he wrote Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does. He looks like a workaday actor from 1958 until 1978, and then wrote the seminal science fiction movie of our lifetime. So
yeah, it's insane. It's incredible. So I guess here's another question, and this is obviously to both of you, but I'm trying in my head as I was watching The Minus Man, I was trying to figure out how you get from Blade Runner to this. Like, what sort of connective, like what would make a person who so brilliantly adapts, one of the greatest science fiction novels of all time, and then like take away the direction, take away the performances, like just on a script level, I just found myself wanting, right? Like it just doesn't really have much to say.
I think there's an emptiness intended in the character that in some sense does rhyme with Blade Runner. Mm-hmm. But when you cast Owen Wilson, who is so likable, who has this like both all American quality and oddity to him, it actually seems as if the character isn't empty. And yet the behavior of what he's doing does feel like maybe this was a miscast role.
Well, okay, so here's a question for you guys as well, because the other night I watched Big Night for the first time in a long time, and my roommate Melissa had never seen it before. I loved it. Again, I just think it's a wonderful film. She had a hard time watching Stanley Tucci and Tony Shalhoub in the movie because of the, quite frankly, decades of other work that she's seen them in. And it was a little jarring for her, I think, to some degree or another. The reason I bring it up is watching this, it was impossible for me to separate the Owen Wilson that I know and quite frankly love in this role. Now, there's a reason why I don't think Owen Wilson went on to make more movies about playing serial killers, because I'm not necessarily sure it's in his wheelhouse. But it's also, I mean, is it a disservice that we know Owen Wilson as Owen Wilson? I don't know. I mean, I guess perhaps if he was better in the role, it wouldn't have bumped me. I don't know.
You know who I would have cast? I'm not even kidding. I know this is going to sound crazy. I would have cast Chris Klein.
Interesting.
Interesting. Because I feel like there was, Adam, you hit on this, but I feel like there was an airheadedness to this character that Owen Wilson did his darndest to make come across, but I don't think he did it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I also think that they were kind of missing a modus operandi here. Like, I don't think I could tell you why he did it. Like, I don't think I don't even think like I had read a synopsis that kind of tried to tell me why he did it. It was essentially like he picks on people, or he picks people out who, like, you know, should be dying anyway. But I don't think that's true.
I don't think that's true.
Certainly not with the Eric Mabius character. So I just don't really know exactly what was going on here. And I would also say, like, look, this isn't something I'm proud to say, but this is like a completely bloodless serial killer movie. Lacks any kind of emotion, any kind of intensity. All these things may as well have happened off screen, which they basically did. I just don't feel like it makes a whole lot of sense to center a movie around a guy who poisons people very passively and is never really in any danger of getting caught.
Only by fictional characters in his head. He's only fictional characters in his head.
Yeah, it's one of those things where when the film opened and he walks into that bar, right, and immediately,
which, by the way, is one of my favorite restaurants in LA. That bar, just so you know.
Oh, okay.
What is that bar?
That is the Old Place restaurant out in Agora Hills, Cornell, California, just down the 101. And it was a fantastic place. Highly recommend it. I'm shouting out to Old Place Restaurant in Cornell.
Awesome. Cool. He walks into this bar that's completely empty, except for, or it seems empty, except for Sheryl Crow sitting at the bar. And the first thing he asks for is pie.
Yeah.
He says, "Do you guys have any pie?" And I immediately was just like, "What is this movie? Like, is it a comedy? Like, is it about a guy who walks into bars that clearly don't have pie? Like, why would this place have pie?"
They spend the next minute and a half talking about, is there such a thing as pickle pie? So maybe it is a comedy.
Like, I honestly think that it opens in a way that I didn't hate, which is that it felt kind of odd and kind of like weirdly prickly. And there's this tension that exists between the bartender and Sheryl Crow.
Yeah, I mean, the bartender is also John Carroll Lynch, who's like everyone's favorite character actor.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, and for me, like, seeing Sheryl Crow in a fucking movie was great.
Yeah, she was great.
So, it's such a bizarre fucking film.
Like, that was the thing that was sort of, that really hit me off the top was, and this was why I sort of posited the question to you guys earlier about intent, right? I mean, Kenny and I have talked about this a lot over the course of this podcast, and I just couldn't help but watch it thinking, is this intentional? Like, I just don't know. Like, has he just fallen into this odd, structure-y kind of formlessness and existential kind of component to the movie as well? Is this just sort of like I don't know, I guess I'll just sort of point the camera at these people and hope that it works out? I really don't know.
But I feel like this conversation what we're having may in fact be the you'll be up talking about it all night conversation that they advertise. Like, because it's funny when you read the summary, and the summary starts by saying like a quirky guy or something decides to leave behind his life and go kill people.
A quirky murderer.
Right. But like none of that's in the movie, right? Like, he's not a guy who left behind his life. We meet him on the road killing people.
Yep.
Right. So like
He
We have
claims
no
he left
context.
behind his he claims he left behind his life, but I don't know if you're supposed to believe that. I don't know what you're supposed to believe.
I also think that,
want-
Kenny, your point too, in terms of so much off-screen action. I mean, as we all know, we've all worked in television. Budgetarily speaking, every now and then you have no choice but to be like, yeah, remember when that thing happened that we couldn't afford to actually shoot? But
Yes.
this movie is all character stuff and plot stuff that's happening on the periphery, which again feels so intentional to me that I'm just like, maybe he wanted to exist in this weird kind of nebulous gray zone for 2 hours. Like that was his goal.
So I think he did. Like I do think that there was an intention to make an off-kilter, almost surrealist character study of a person who clearly has some, let's say demons, right?
Yeah.
Something brewing underneath the surface.
Yeah.
What irked me so much, and this is subjective, but there was absolutely no style to this movie.
Oh, no.
Right? So you have all these structural flights and all these flights from, traditional filmmaking, which in general, I'm all for. But it reminds me, it's a horrible thing to say because I love the director, Tony Scott. But that movie, The Jacket, you ever see that movie?
Yes.
It felt like that, where there are all these like decisions that were made for the sake of doing something different, but not to actually illuminate character, not to actually drive narrative, not to actually, even be allegorical or anything. It just felt like there's another way to do things. He could imagine a couple of cops who would maybe get him one day. It's just another thing you could do, which it is. It is another thing you could do, but it doesn't tell me shit.
Yeah.
And it was shot awfully. It looked terrible.
Okay, so this was a question I texted Adam, and I was like, was this movie shot in Super 16 or is Amazon's transfer just garbage? Like, I really couldn't
My answer
tell.
was, I think the answer is both.
That's what Adam said both, which seems right to me. I mean, it's all very soft, unintentionally so, and grainy. It seems, perhaps, or they just didn't have the money to.
You're talking about the film stock, but I'm talking about mostly the production design.
Yeah. No, it's
because
an
I
ugly
hate
looking
it's
movie.
the yellow. It's like the yellowest movie I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But this look is not. It's not unfamiliar to me going into indie films in New York in 1999. Like, I feel
That's
like
true.
It looks like what a lot of movies that are made for very low budget at that time kind of look like.
Well, so here's what's funny. So I watched the movie on Amazon Prime, and at the end of the movie, you know how Amazon will be like, you should watch this next, right? And the movie they suggested I watch was Clay Pigeons.
Me too.
Where I'm just like, okay, sure. I understand why you're putting these two together.
I like bad movies.
Starring the guys from Wedding Crashers. Yes.
You must like terrible films. So here's another one.
Perhaps we can get someone to watch this one.
I saw Clay Pigeons in the theater, by the fucking way, which, I mean, Lord knows why. But this movie just feels like, and I want to kind of just to, the Vince Vaughn thing is, I think, worthy of discussion for a second, because Vince Vaughn obviously comes on the scene in Swingers. Everybody loves him. And then he does Lost World shortly thereafter. But then for whatever reason, perhaps his own or his agent, I don't know, he goes into a string of dramas, right? Like it's the Psycho remake, it's The Cell, it's a bunch of dramas. And he gets kind of lost in there, and then Old School happens, and then we're back on the rails, and we're back in comedy land. The reason I bring it up is Owen Wilson only does this before pivoting quickly into Wes Anderson movies and finding his comedy lane and what have you.
It's not really a pivot though, right? Like that's where he started.
Right.
That's Best Friend.
Right.
He wrote those movies.
Right. But I'm just speaking to the fact that it feels like Owen Wilson understands this is not my lane, but I'm gonna try.
Dude, he was in The Haunting this year too.
That's
like,
right.
Don't forget that. Like, someone was trying to do something with Owen Wilson, which was stupid.
He got decapitated in The Haunting, though. That was pretty cool.
He also was in Armageddon and Anaconda around this time, and they were released before, but I have a sneaking suspicion shot after.
Yes.
I have a feeling this movie maybe was shot before Anaconda and Armageddon, but maybe not. I don't know.
Owen Wilson, and we're going to do our top fives at the end.
Adam.
I agree with you, Adam, 100%. We'll talk about our Owen Wilsons at the end, but I felt like it was worth kind of highlighting the somewhat parallel Vince Vaughn, Owen Wilson situation that transpired for a second there, when everyone thought for whatever reason that Vince Vaughn was going to become everybody's favorite dramatic actor.
Let me throw something out.
Please, yeah.
If you were an agent and you had a guy who came up through indie comedy, now it's very clear that both these guys made their own way, right? Yeah. You had a guy that came up through indie comedy, well-respected indie comedies. I know Bottle Rocket and Swingers weren't nominated, but they certainly were on top 10 lists and whatnot. Sure. And their directors went on to have massive careers, blah, blah, blah. If you were their agent and you didn't know whether they could hack it in mainstream comedies, because that's a different bone, you might try the Ben Affleck thing. The thing where you might see if is this guy your leading man these days, or even like the Ed Burns thing, who didn't come from a comedy, but Ed Burns went from like micro indies to movies like this. Within a few, the ones he didn't direct were all like movies like this. We're like, these guys are good looking enough, and there's always room for a good looking white guy to carry a movie and to go forward. So I think it's an interesting thing that in the late 90s, a more grounded comedic actor like Vince Vaughn or Owen Wilson was something that people didn't really know what to do with. Because in the 90s, remember who's ruling the 90s? Robin Williams and Eddie Murphy and really big fucking personalities were in. You had the beginning of the Will Ferrells, like still these SNL giant people. So I can understand why they gave it a shot.
Sure.
It didn't work.
It didn't. I mean, it's also like, I'm also thinking about how I agree with you, Kenny, in terms of like the leading man thing. Because like that's a pretty big tent, right? Like the leading man can kind of almost do a little bit of everything. But the roles that Vince is given are all serial killers and dirtbags. Like these are not guys that the guy in The Cell is a detective who's like basically dangling by a thread. Clay Pigeons and Psycho are obviously like straight on murderers. And then you've got the guy in that movie that was sort of the Broke Down Palace ripoff. I don't know which one came first, but where they get trapped in Thailand, where it's like him and I think it's like Anne Hesh and Joaquin Phoenix. Anyway, my point is that it's just like, I agree with you, Kenny, but it's also like Vince didn't really get the best shot at being a leading man either, in a weird way. Like he got their big roles. I mean, being fucking, I can't think of the character's name from Psycho, but like, I don't know.
It's worth looking at what you're saying, Kenny, though, because what you got to realize, I think, a little bit about what the shooting gallery was when in 1999. The shooting gallery was considering themselves like an independent studio. And they were the producers of Sling Blade and You Can Count on Me. And they're coming to you and saying, we got the guy who wrote Blade Runner.
Yeah.
And he's going to direct this movie about this really dark role about this guy who kills people because they don't like themselves much. And is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? But he's maybe charming. And it's got this all-American quality. Come along here. You might win an Oscar for this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that it's a pretty good sell too, by the way. I think we're talking maybe a couple years too late.
Yeah.
Right. I think a savvy representative or a savvy executive might realize, and we've done a lot of movies like this. So one that pops to my head is Happy Texas. Or a lot of these movies that were kind of on the tail end of this 90s indie boom that were looking backwards a little bit at what had gotten some of these quirky indie movies, these quirky indie directors and actors break into mainstream. Yeah. But I do see what you're saying, Adam. I do think that, I think he could have looked at this and said, complicated villain. Maybe I'm Travis Bickle. Who knows? They
didn't know this was the year that Being John Malkovich was going to come out. They didn't know this was the year American Beauty was going to come out. Like they didn't know that this was the year that like true indie was going to get kind of really overshadowed by kinda indie.
Yep.
Right? Like
this is the year indie got a budget.
Yes.
And that is how we got where we are. That's part of why this year is so wonderful for us.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this film does feel like it was made in the pre-budget era. We've seen a lot of those films, and for the most part, in my opinion at least, they don't really hold up.
No, I mean it's interesting. So this film was nominated for the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance as well, which speaks to sort of what you're talking about of just sort of like trying to give it the indie bona fides in order to get it out there and get people talking about it in that way. And I the other thing that sort of hit me, I just rewatched Grosse Pointe Blank on the weekend, which I hadn't seen in quite some time. And spoiler, it's still a great movie, but that's the kind of killer I could see Owen Wilson playing, right? Like that's the type of
definitely.
That's the type of dark comedy murderer that I could get on board Owen Wilson perhaps being. This movie, unfortunately, not to keep harping on this, but because it's so amorphous, it's hard to even tell when the jokes are the jokes and they're not. Like you're just sort of in this, and again, like the Owen Wilson-ness of it also you just don't know what to make of it. Like his VO is so bizarre. Like at times it made me laugh.
It's almost the best part.
I think part of the reason Hampton Fancher wanted to make this movie, my guess is it's based on a book. Yeah. And my guess he fell in love with some of the poetry like prose. Whether that prose is as deep as others may have felt. I can tell you, I told this to Phil Kenny. I quoted this movie in my high school yearbook.
The Minus Man?
Yes.
Adam is the Minus Man.
He's coming through like the Kool-Aid Man through the door.
And this goes back to me saying, I might have been a young 17 or intellectually young 17. But there are some lines in this movie that are like, you can imagine like a 17-year-old living alone in New York City for the summer and like feeling big about themselves. Like, here's these lines. And it's like, I want to write lines like that.
What was the quote?
How about this? I'm going to read you.
He's going to read a couple.
I'm going to read you two of the lines and you guess which one was my quote.
I'll play the game.
Okay. All right, here we go. You don't always choose what you do. Sometimes what you do chooses you. That's where discipline comes in.
Okay, I remember that quote. They were focusing on his pants at that point. I remember.
The most important part of understanding someone is knowing if they can hurt you. I never make a plan. Like a comet shooting across the sky, it just happens. Nobody knows where I'll land. I feel like a light in the dark. They come to me like moths because I shine. Lakes are like stepping into someone else's underwear.
All right, so it's 3 or 5.
All right.
It's the comet or the underwear. It depends a lot on. I only just met you. So the audience knows I only just met Adam right now, but I can see his face.
Yeah.
And he doesn't seem like a lake underwear man. He seems like a comet man. I'm gonna go with the comet.
All right, Phil, you want to go with, what are you going with?
I mean, I got to agree with Kenny. I mean, it might. When you sent me the quotes, the one that jumped out at me was the lakes.
Okay.
If I'm being honest, but I feel like I know you well enough, Adam, that I tend to agree with Kenny that the comet feels more akin to you. But I didn't know you in high school, so I mean.
No, I apparently quoted in my high school yearbook. I feel like a light in the dark. They come to me like moths because I shine.
That's kind of
all
scary.
Right, that's the end of this podcast.
Which is a serial killer talking about how he finds his victims.
Yeah. Woo.
And I think my mom saw my yearbook quote and was like, if you ever are accused of murder, they're going to dig up your yearbook and bring it into court.
Yep. They might.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That affected me.
That's pretty dark.
I'll
say like
I'm not entirely sure I understood that at the time that I chose that quote for my yearbook, I'm not entirely sure I consciously got that it was a serial killer talking about his victims.
Well, this is the thing about this movie, which is that I
assume you didn't.
Yeah.
Phil, sorry, but also it's terrible. Either way.
But this is how much this movie was like important or like imprinted on me in that moment in my life. And then I never watched it again until 2 days ago. But like at that moment in time when we're literally like, October of my senior year of high school, like needing to put a quote down, and The Minus Man came out last month, I'm like, yes, this is the beginning of everything. That's
incredible. There are actually some lines in this movie that this movie is not necessarily like on the page poorly written. I really love the scene with Brian Cox and Owen Wilson when he's talking about Christmas climbing over the back fence, and him getting a job at the post office, and like just that notion of things being around the corner. Again, like Hant is not a bad writer necessarily. Yep. I just think that this film is just so bizarre. Yeah, go ahead.
I desperately wanted to like this movie.
I know.
Because it's 2 hours of my life.
Sure.
And I like this genre in theory, right? Mm-hmm. If you're gonna give me schlock, this is my kind of schlock in theory. Mm-hmm. But there's no suspense. There was no tension. There was very little narrative drive. There was and so in the absence of that, what's in its place? And I can't really tell you what's in its place that hooked me. That being said, like this was far from the worst movie we did.
Oh, 100%.
Far from the worst movie we've done. And I couldn't decide whether I hated it or didn't like it.
Well, there's a quality to this that feels a lot like if you were to chop this thing in half, I could see this being an AMC pilot 7 or 8 years ago.
Sure.
Right? Like there's a quality to it of the way it moves, the way it's pacing, that there's something ahead of its time about it that is just different, that it feels to me like, there's almost a TV show here.
I'd be more intrigued by the TV version.
Yeah.
It reminds me a little bit, you're saying AMC, I'm just kind of, half a channel over on Sundance. It reminds me a little, what's the show?
Rectify?
You know what I'm talking about? Rectify.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. A little bit of Rectify, very slow burn. Things don't have to happen every episode. Yeah. And you're with the character at all times, trying to kind of figure out his place in the world. Movies require a beginning, middle, and end. To some extent, right? You don't need it, but I mean, come on. If you're not going to have it, you better have something else that's pretty powerful in its place. And I think it was missing everything. But I Rectify. It really did feel like the pilot of Rectify.
Well, there's something also. I mean, the last shot of the film is such a shrug. It's such like, I don't know, one way or the other way. Like, it's literally a fork in the road, which again, like if you ended your pilot that way, sure, you can end a pilot on an ellipse. You can't end a fucking movie that way, really. It's this movie is not committed to anything. And I think it takes pride in that.
You know what I think
that state trooper storyline you're talking about, right? Where they go their separate ways at the end, and she saw him on the beach, right near the beginning, right? Like that feels like, this is a piece of a TV show, right? Like the state trooper is on to the killer, and he's moved on to another town.
Yep.
Adam, you might possibly be able to speak to this, but that reeks to me of a tacked on ending after some screenings.
I have no idea.
Well, I'll tell you because the state trooper storyline is not a storyline, right? There's nothing there. There's a beat where he's on the beach and she finds him in the car. And then an hour later, or an hour and 10 minutes later, she's the one with him on the highway in her car and he's in his car. And she has absolutely no reason. There's absolutely no reason for us to suspect that she's coming after him, except that she is law enforcement and he's a criminal. So there's the veneer of tension, and the soundtrack is out of control in that moment. Out of control, trying to make you feel something. But you cut that out, there's actually nothing there except what feels like, this is a serial killer movie. Why don't you give the audience something to actually feel like this guy's in jeopardy about before you end the film? I feel pretty confident that I do want to talk about one other thing on the soundtrack.
Yeah,
You guys caught what the soundtrack was for most of the movie.
I mean, there were songs.
A slowed down piano version of the Notre Dame fight song. Discuss.
No.
Stop it.
Hail, hail to old Notre Dame. Hail to the glory. Hail to the fame.
That's incredible. Wow.
Did they use the non-slowed down during the football game?
Well, it started around the football time, but it's Notre Dame. It's like it would be like if you had a movie about a rock band and you just started playing Stairway to Heaven all the time. Or a movie where there's a rock star character in it who was like a James Taylor character that just constantly playing Cashmere. So that was so fucking weird to me. And the best I could do was like, all right, so a little slice of Americana and the inversion of it. But it's like, again, this feels like a thing without thinking of the implications of the thing, and with doing something that's completely not stylized in a way that I find interesting.
It needs to be said too that the music cues by and large are very strange. I found them quite jarring. I found that there's a couple moments of like montaginess where there's just a really abrupt music cue that's really just taking a hard turn tonally that feels
it's Marco Beltrami, the composer.
Sure, but it feels like there's just moments where they're just like, the movies we got to inject it. It needs a kick in the ass. So like you'll have this like weird inserted montage with a kind of up music cue that I just don't really get. But just to walk through the plot of this a little bit, we mentioned the beginning where he meets Sheryl Crow in the bar. She's a heroin addict who does heroin in plain sight, just out in public, in a truck, which doesn't feel like a thing, but sure. I mean, maybe it is. I don't know.
She says to him, "Hey, do you want to get high, or do you get high?"
Yeah,
you're like thinking pot, and then she's pulling out heroin.
Yeah, he's thinking it's gonna be weed. She pulls out some heroin, it's a lot. Anyway, he kills her. We never see him kill her. We don't know what he does with the body. He just speaks sort of obliquely about it.
Well, he leaves her body in the bathroom of a roadside stop or something.
But it's not clear that he killed her. It looks like she OD'd.
Yes.
But he kind of says it over voiceover that something about, letting her sleep forever. I don't know.
Yeah.
There was something there, but
yeah, and that once it's gone, you can't go back. Something about that.
Sure.
Yes, I think that's what it was.
Then you get he rents the room of the missing daughter of Brian Cox and Mercedes Rule.
Yes.
A missing person case that's never resolved. Am I incorrect in that assessment?
I'm not confident it's a missing persons case. I'm not she may have just left and never left a number. But
okay, sure. Then Doug, Brian Cox, takes Van to a high school football game. Maybe this is where your Notre Dame comes in, Kenny.
Yeah.
Because that's when you get this bizarro football montage with this blaring music and dissolves, and it's all super weird and very surreal and heightened.
It feels a little bit like somebody said, "Can we get a better sense for what the town's like?" And the solution was, "Yeah, why don't we put some high school football game in here?"
Well, it felt like Friday Night Lights meets Blue Velvet. It had this David Lynchian Friday Night Lights.
There's a
vibe.
show to that.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe that's what they wanted. Maybe that's what they wanted the movie to be. Honestly,
the entire movie feels a bit like Twin Peaks.
It does feel Lynchian but all the wrong ways, in all the kind of snoozy ways that you don't want, but whatever.
Well, I think that's my point, right?
Yes.
Whenever Lynch departs, which is any time he does anything, it's always really interesting. It's always really surprising. It's always really kind of thought provoking.
Sure.
And feel and emotion inducing. And I got nothing from any of these kind of departures. So I do think that that's the danger of trying. No one should ever try to emulate David Lynch, because
don't do it.
You're barking up the wrong tree. The whole point is that he's unemulatable, and he would tell you, if you want to be like me, do exactly what's in your brain.
Yep.
So.
I fully agree with you. It's David Lynch is, as I'm sure we can all attest, every film school, every class you have, any film class you have, there's always someone in that class that loves David Lynch and is striving for that level of weirdness. But like, the problem is David Lynch doesn't think he's being weird.
No, he's just going into
being David Lynch.
He's just doing like transcendental meditation and coming out of it and just like writing down whatever it is he saw at that time. Yeah. And he's like, I am going to pull that image out of my actual dream and put it on the screen.
Well, it's like I remember seeing a clip once of him on The Tonight Show, I believe, where he brought a video with him. Like, he did an interview, and then at the end, Jay Leno was like, so you have a video to show? He's like, yeah, I did this thing in my garage that I thought would be kind of cool. And he built a head out of cheese and had ants just eat it and filmed it in time lapse, right?
What I love about David Lynch, is his art is so fucking weird. But he is so fucking normal.
He's the sweetest man ever.
And all the crazies, all the crazy artists, are the most normal people, because they get it all the fuck out. The people who aren't normal in real life are like the ones that really are scary.
Yeah. The ones that bottle it up and don't know how to.
And the ones who make boring movies.
Yeah. So basically, Doug recommends that Owen Wilson get a job at the post office. He does so around Christmas. A few days later, Van offers a ride to one of the athletes, one of the football players, kills him, buries his body at the beach. Again,
kills him almost accidentally. Yeah. Like almost just like he happened to have his poison lying around. And the guy's like, can I have a sip of this poison? And
he's like, all right.
Sure, why not?
That's like it's so, all of the murders are a shrug in this movie, right? So you never feel the walls closing in on this character because he doesn't seem to care one way or the other.
It's supposed to be that he's like killing people who don't like their life or something, but
sure,
it's not. That's what all of the summaries of the movies,
right?
I'm not sure that's what the movie actually does.
I agree.
Right, like,
I was looking for that too, right? Because I read the summaries and I was looking for that. I was starting to write my notes based on that, because the Eric Mavis character Gene gets in his car and does start complaining about his life, right? Yeah. Which Sheryl Crow does too, to some extent. So you do start thinking like, well, all right. I was thinking, okay, I guess this is what it is. It would be nice if maybe they gave me some indication why people just start complaining to Owen Wilson, because that's not a very movie thing to do, to have a fucking random character come into the scene to complain to your protagonist. So I would like to see, like, all right, what is it about this particular guy that he has a psychologist quality?
Yes.
I don't know if that's what's going on here. I think that's just some dialogue.
I agree. I mean, I think that the only real sense that we have that this guy is perhaps like fully broken inside his head is what we get now, which is this imaginary conversation with these two detectives played by Dwight Yoakam and Dennis Haysbert. Dennis Haysbert back again, Kenny.
I know, back again.
We just did the 13th hour. 13th floor. We talked about him in Major League as well. Dennis Haysbert, again, a thankless role in this movie.
Yes. Very good in it. I love the energy he brings.
It's always a great energy.
He ever since he's been David Palmer, he's always kind of had to play these upright characters, but I really like him as kind of a heavy. I think there's a lot there.
I agree. He's great. But they're there to basically just taunt our taunt Van, but also they're such clunky fucking, like, they're just there to facilitate, like, this is why he's doing this, or this might be why he's doing this, or the cops might get wind of this someday. Like, I don't know.
I think there's a quality here where they're really trying to let us in his head. They're really trying to get us into his head, right? Like it's a movie driven with a lot of voiceover. These two characters that are pursuing him are in his head. They don't really exist, and they taunt him about what he's doing. I feel like the movie is trying to get in the head of somebody who is killing people who don't want to be alive. So maybe he's doing a good thing, but he's tortured by it. But none of that's coming through.
I agree.
But I feel like that's what it's trying to do.
Yeah, it's trying to do a lot of things, but it's not succeeding really at any of them. You know, the next bit is, you know, Janine Garofalo, whose character's name is Farron, Ferrin, not a name. Again, not a name I've ever heard before.
But her performance, I will say,
is great. She's great. I'd watch that movie.
Yes. I'm captivated by her performance in here, and I think it's one of the more actually subtle and compelling performances she's actually ever done.
I agree.
And not to objectify it, but I don't think she's ever looked more beautiful. She was radiant 100%. In this film.
Yes. And there's such a she manages to convince you she's fallen in love with this guy just how she's looking at him.
Yep.
It's like just between the words, it's such a good performance.
Those are the best scenes in the movie. The best scene of the movie for me on an emotional level is whenever you're in a movie, and Owen Wilson played 34. I think emotionally he was more like in his 20s. I think she was in her 20s.
Yeah.
Whenever you have 20 people in their 20s in their movies, when they're about to get sexual in any way, they jump into it. Every time they jump right into it. That's never been my experience. Unless you are drunk in public and you're stupid, it's always been, particularly with someone you like, something that there is that moment of should I or shouldn't I? Something where you're sitting next to each other and you're like, what's happening exactly right now? She played that so well, and then putting that blanket over her head is also something I could see someone doing. Like, can't you see what I'm putting out? Mm-hmm. So I thought that was great.
She's tremendous in this. She really is tremendous in this film, and I want to see the film she's in. Right, like she's locked into something that is special. They have a great chemistry. I was racking my brain trying to think of another movie that they're in together or scenes they share together, and I'm not sure that they do. I mean, they're obviously both in a lot of Ben Stiller movies, but they never really crossed before, and they've got a really nice, interesting energy, and maybe someday they'll do something else together, because I would love to see them work together again. Their scenes are the best scenes in the movie, without a fucking doubt. Here we are. We are approaching the end of The Minus Man. Basically, Owen, Van, whatever, he basically sees another victim that he thinks about killing. This woman goes back to her house. She's a painter, but something's off about her and her work, and he decides not to kill her. Again, proving what we're talking about, which is, why is this man killing people? It's really anybody's guess. There's a great scene, actually, where Doug and Jane and Owen talk about Christmas, and his eyes start to well up with tears as he feels conflicted about what he's doing. There's a moment of made me think, if there was more here, Owen might have been able to rise to the challenge. But because the movie feels so nothingness, I don't know that he has anything to do.
This movie feels nothingness.
Yes. Yeah. You also get a great scene where Van goes to work and Farron asks him why he'd ever called her. And she's like, because you never asked for my number. It's a very cute scene. The cutest scene in the movie, where she just seems absolutely adorable. And I was totally sold on her. Then a bunch of shit happens, but ultimately, really, when everything is said and done, the only character relationship that I cared about was the one with Janine Garofalo. He forces himself at one point by initiating this very hostile, almost
I thought he might
violent, almost rape, right?
Killing her. I thought we might actually see a murder. He might have graduated to violent murder, but he just kind of
But she really, I feel like, doesn't fit into the mold of this concept of he only kills people who really dislike their life. She does not feel like to me somebody. There's a life in her. There's like life in her, which is why I think we're talking about how great her performance is. Like there's such like life in her subtly underneath, and just like you're still feeling feelings. And so like you don't if he's trying to kill her, it doesn't fit in the mold of at least the theory going around the rest of this.
I have a theory.
Oh, great. Okay.
I think the three of us easily could recut this film, lose about 20 to 25 minutes that are all murder based, and mess with the soundtrack a little bit and the score, and have a perfectly sweet indie comedy about a guy who left home, gets boards with these people who are kind of like not really loving each other, totally on a different page with each other, ingratiates himself with the father, gets a job at the post office, which by the way I thought was really cool. Falls in love with a girl there and can't really like rise to the occasion, and winds up like driving off into the moon set or wherever he drove off into.
You know how like
it's not that hard.
But you know how people do those trailers where they'll take like a horror movie or like The Shining and turn it into a comedy?
Is like a
how someone hasn't taken this movie and made a minus
stupid movie.
No one knows this movie
doesn't exist.
But with this cast, think about the trailer you could make with the minus man.
I think we could do it. I mean, I think like there's we've watched movies like this. Like there's a movie
like minus. We just call it minus.
Yeah, well, I would call it the plus man.
Somehow, in taking 25 minutes out, it grows in size.
Yes, it's amazing.
Addition by subtraction, if you will. But it reminds me of so many fucking indie comedies, like light indie comedies about like kind of broken people who kind of found each other. And like, I'm not saying it'd be great, but I bet you if we go and cut that movie, I bet you Owen Wilson will come and do the voiceover, the new voiceover.
For sure.
Here's what I would do. Now I really am pitching you the movie that I would do for real.
Okay.
I'd cut out every moment that ties Owen Wilson to these murders, and I would keep the murders as a subplot happening within this movie. And I would even keep the Dennis Haysbert, Dwight Yoakam stuff. So now you don't know whether or not this guy is like because I think the interesting thing would be like he's from Oregon and they find out that the poison is from the Pacific Northwest. Then your question is, wait, had this guy been killing these people off screen throughout the movie? But there you go. You can talk about it for hours. So the sun comes up.
You want to play it card down.
I want to play it cards down. That's right.
And never turn the card up.
I would never turn the card up. And then the end even plays because you don't know what anyone knows at the end.
Yeah, it's the funny thing is that the movie is already not really telling us anything. Like we never actually see him really do much. Like it's already living in this space of like maybe. Like I agree with you, just go farther with it and just like lean into it. But like the movie doesn't have anything to I don't feel like the movie is actually pointing us towards he doesn't do anything.
Considering you're kind of married to this idea of bloodless killing, at least get something out of it.
I agree.
Right? At least get something out of it. At least get some intrigue. I am now compelled to recut this movie.
We should do it.
I'm going to lose my family over it, but
here's the other thing though. We're talking about bloodless murder. There's another murder that happens in this film where Mercedes Ruehl is killed off screen again.
Yeah.
Are we supposed to think Doug did it? Are we supposed to like her husband did it? Are we supposed to? I mean, he's ultimately arrested for it by the police at the end, but are we really supposed to believe he did it? I don't know.
Is there any chance that Kenny, the movie you're proposing, is in fact the movie we watched?
I was thinking that, Adam, as I was saying it. I was thinking like, is it possible? And I would say no, but I would say, is it possible? Because I was messing with it, like the idea of like, he's not actually giving them poison. He's actually giving them booze, right? Yeah. It actually is just Amaretto. He actually didn't, but then I think you're coming down on the wrong side of it because now you're coming down on the, all right, so what we see Sorry, that's my dog. So what you see isn't believing. And I think the opposite would work better is are there sorry, I'm gonna let it.
One thing we know that is true is that he does in fact see two cops who are not real.
Right.
He could. So the idea would be he
cops.
is imagining. The idea would be he is also imagining the murders.
Yes.
But these people died. So you would have to be.
But we don't know if he did it.
But you're now you're now in a weird chronological place because in the chronology of the movie, they died before their bodies were found. So do you see what I'm saying? We as audience, the only way that this makes sense from a chronological standpoint is if the chronology of the movie is told from Owen Wilson's point of view in the future as he reconstructs it for you, the viewer. And then you're in like this swimming. I don't know if you guys remember the movie Swimming Pool. The swimming pool territory where are we just watching some novel confession thing where who knows if it's happened? I don't think that's the movie we watched, Adam. But I want to watch the movie.
But you know what I do think? The movie you guys are talking about is the movie that they marketed.
Yes.
Yes.
So let's rate this film. As you know, Adam, we rate these films from 0 to 99. You saw this film in 99. Kenny and I did not. So what did you think of it in 99? What did you think of it before this podcast? And what do you think of it after?
I'm going to go, I think I would have given it like an 85 in 99.
Okay.
Like I said, this was a point in my life and, it spoke to me in the moment, probably speaking to like my ego of my involvement, even in such the tangential corner of this thing.
Yep.
Going into this podcast, I 38, 40.
Okay. That feels right. Yeah.
And now.
Yeah, I'm
38, 40. I don't know that it's changed. I don't know it's got worse. I think if Kenny recuts the movie, it probably will jump up above that 50 mark.
I think that's fair.
That's what I want to hear. Actually, I think this is the easiest
rating?
job I've no, it's hard rating. That's the easiest like job I've ever given myself. I can do that by the end of the week.
I totally agree.
I just have to learn how to edit something.
and that can be done in a week. No,
yes.
Well, yeah.
So I, as I mentioned, did not see this.
Will, I have no doubt Will is able to do that. Producer Will, are you able to do that?
Yeah.
Just edit the movie. Edit the movie with me. We can get a suite somewhere and do it. I knew we could.
I mean, this sounds like Patreon content. I don't know.
Oh my God.
Maybe
we want to get people over there. Get the Kenny Nyberg cut of the Minus Man would get us how many people on the Patreon?
That is just the kind of Don Quixote-esque activity I would get myself into. I don't care if anyone watches. I don't care. What matters to me is that it exists in the world.
Nobody saw the original movie. Maybe they'll watch it.
That's fantastic. That's great.
All right. Will, let me know if you want to do it.
So before this podcast, I gave this film a 55. After this podcast, I think I'm down to like a 45. I'd be hard pressed to recommend this cut of the film. Kenny's cut of the film, I'm sure I could definitely recommend to the masses. Kenny, what did you think on this rating before we do our top 5 Owen Wilsons real quick?
46 before this movie. Didn't think it was this bad. 35 now.
35? Sure.
I think it's pretty bad, but it's not that bad. Like
I want to say that Janine Garoppolo's performance in this is still at an 85.
100%, for sure. As I would agree with you.
Like if you can just make it through the other moments of the movie just to watch the scenes with Janine Garoppolo and him, it's worth your time.
That's what Kenny's movie is going to be.
Yeah. Just gonna be I really want to do that. I really need is another global pandemic.
Yeah, just to get you where, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So we're going to do our top 5 Owen Wilsons. We'll go around, starting at 5, working our way up. I'll start. My number 5 is Wedding Crashers. I don't know how well it holds up. I haven't really watched it since it came out in '05. I remember seeing it in the theater. I mean, Kenny and I were both at UTA when that movie came out, I think. Right, Kenny? Were you there when it came out or no?
Maybe not. I think it might have predated me by like weeks.
Okay, because I was there when it came out, and that weekend and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory both came out on the same weekend. It was a big weekend for UTA. They were jumping up and down about UTA talent. So it was a big movie. They're both very good in it, very enjoyable at the time. Obviously, Rich and McAdams, fantastic in it. But what's your number 5, Adam?
I'm going to go with Shanghai Noon.
Oh, okay.
It's another movie that I saw, pretty young. And, all of my top 5 Owen Wilson choices go toward a little bit a variety of Owen Wilson. There's like a quote I read about Jesse Plemons in an article once that said, like, he can play like the sweetest guy in the world or the most evil person, and it's not clear exactly what he's doing differently, but it somehow works. Mm-hmm. I feel like that also kind of can apply to Owen Wilson
sure.
a little bit. Sure. And High Noon to me is like, you get some good comedy chops, you get some action chops, and seeing him play, it's this weird thing to me where he is an all-American quality, but he's so uniquely himself. And that's to me on display in full force there in Shanghai.
It also feels like, and forgive me, I don't know if Shanghai Noon came out before or after Wedding Crashers, but I want to say before.
It was before.
It is very interesting to see how Hollywood tried to make Owen Wilson a leading man, right? Like he kind of is a little bit of an odd vibe, but like you see him in, as you said, Shanghai Noon, or in what was the I Spy? Mm-hmm. Which again is not a great movie, but Owen Wilson brings an energy that you got to kind of enjoy. Like he's always enjoyable, even if the movies he's in aren't that great. But Kenny, what's your number 5?
So I, as I'm going through my Owen Wilson filmography, trying to come up with a top 5, it occurred to me, I don't think I like Owen Wilson movies that much.
Okay. I said to Phil off here, I was like, there's something really interesting, which is Owen Wilson holds this huge place in the zeitgeist and in my mind. And if you pull Wes Anderson and the Cars movies out of his list, he actually hasn't made that much.
Well, like, he's made a lot of like weird one-off things that didn't work. Like you just named a couple of them. Yeah. Drill Bit Taylor.
Yeah. You mean Dupree?
You mean Dupree? Yeah. It's not really an attempt to be a franchise, but he made that the movie about the storm a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. He makes the tsunami. He makes a lot. Is that what it was? A tsunami?
No, I think it was No Escape. Is that what that is?
No Escape was a different movie. He might have made a tsunami movie, but it was like an action movie. Owen Wilson makes a lot of movies that seem to be like he was like the 6th or 7th choice on it. He's like, I got to work this year. I'll just do it. I'm Owen Wilson. I can handle it.
Yeah, I got one of those next, then number 4.
So he, I might too, because I do think I did put one of those on the list. But I decided to put a movie that is not really an Owen Wilson movie, number 5. Just a movie I love. Armageddon. Love Armageddon.
Sure.
And love every actor in that movie. I think they all do a great job. I think that movie is a tour de force. But we will talk about it on our Bruckheimer screen draft coming up.
Will we, though?
That's an open question, but that's not a knock on Armageddon. It is just a testament to how incredible Bruckheimer's filmography is.
Yeah, it's pretty stellar.
I battled that, and I almost put Armageddon on my list.
My number 4 is Inherent.
And by the way, I want to say one more thing. I don't like Wedding Crashers. Didn't like it at the time. Don't like it today.
Okay.
I don't think it's funny.
I would actually, a movie slipped my mind that I actually think I would probably put in number 5 over Wedding Crashers, which would I think Marley and Me is actually a really sweet movie, and I think he's quite good in it. And I agree with you, Kenny, that my problems with Wedding Crashers now, it doesn't hold up particularly well in terms of some of the energy and what have you in it. So, but anyway, my number 4 is Inherent Vice, which is a movie that felt like it never really connected with people at the time. And Owen Wilson is fantastic in it. And yeah, that's my number 4.
I have to see that again because I saw it once in the theater, and it didn't connect to me. And I feel like it's having a moment of conversation again right now. I see it popping up and people being like, "That's a good movie, actually." And
by the way, Adam, I feel the exact same way you did, and I actually thought about putting it at 5, but I had to be true to myself that it really is not something that I can converse about anymore.
I rewatched it over the past couple weeks, or a couple weeks ago. I rewatched it, and I think you guys would like it a lot more on a rewatch. I enjoyed it the first time, but it's a tough. It's a movie that's fucking with you the whole time, and it's daring you to engage in it. Really, you know what I mean? It's daring you to be like, can you keep with this Byzantine plot? And the answer is you're not really supposed to. So that's what it is. But what's your number 4, Adam?
Behind Enemy Lines, and this is again going to the variety of Owen Wilson, and you're watching that maze of his career, right? Like similar to how we were talking about, you know, what would Minus Man take him into that Oscar territory? You're like, could we put him in the action territory? Like, could he? There's a world where he had his Jason Bourne, you know, and like for his career or something. And I actually think he's quite good in this role doing this thing. And I actually think it would be good to see more of him in that way. Or would have been. I don't know. Now he can do it anymore.
Now he's in Loki. That's what he's doing next.
Which, by the way, I would put the Loki trailer in my top 5. I don't know if that's allowed, but I would throw it there.
Kenny, what's your number 4?
My number 4 is Marley and Me. I love Marley and Me.
Nice.
Yeah, super sad.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really sad. My number 3 is... I mean, it's Midnight in Paris, guys. And
I'm there too.
You know, I know, Kenny, I know. But
whoa! Oh man!
I didn't know.
Of all weeks. Oh my goodness, guys!
For those who aren't paying for a Patreon, Kenny has shrunk himself into his hoodie. To
wasn't even good at the time.
I am in the same space, Phil. I didn't know we're allowed to use this movie for obvious reasons, but like. I love Paris. It's a beautiful city. You could watch this movie on mute and appreciate it. And like, there's something interesting about Owen Wilson doing the thing that was of the guy that we're not going to probably mention.
Yeah, Voldemort. Yeah, I mean, he's doing he is playing. There are people that have been slotted in over the years to do the role that would be played by said individual. And I do think that Owen does it pretty well. I think it's a great cast. To your point, I'm also a sucker for magic realism and just the idea of being able to travel in time to spend time with all of these historical authors and what have you. It's just, it's a nice kind of like whimsical movie that I think Owen weirdly slots really well into. Like, it shouldn't work, but I think that it does. But all that being said, what's your number? You have the same as Kenny. What's your number 3?
I don't fucking Midnight in Paris. That means you guys don't have one of my top 3 movies, which I thought were obvious.
Okay.
Number 3 is Zoolander, which I thought was obvious.
That's my number 2.
Zoolander. He's like the best in Zoolander. He's the best part of Zoolander. It's the
Hansel's
best.
Very hot right now.
Hansel's very hot right now. It's as good as comedic acting gets. The commitment to the bit, and I went more on my favorite movies that have Owen Wilson in them, where he was prominent in them, versus my favorite Owen Wilson performances. That being said, this is my favorite Owen Wilson performance. If it weren't for Owen Wilson in this movie, I don't think I'd like it nearly as much. I'm less taken with Derek Zoolander than I am with Hansel, but it's so good.
There is a magical quality of his performance in Zoolander, which, by the way, I was a set PA on in New York.
That's awesome.
I agree with you. There is a magical quality about it.
It's weird because he very clearly is good looking enough to be a model in real life. And yet, he's playing this role in a way in which the joke is that he's not quite good looking enough to be a model. Yeah. And somehow that works. Mm-hmm. Right? Like I don't know how that works.
I want to amend it a little bit.
Yes. Okay.
All right. So I I didn't love Zoolander when I first watched it, and subsequently I've seen it so many times, and I really have grown to just love it. I think it's amazing. I remember seeing an interview with Ben Stiller when that movie came out, with him spelling out the joke of the movie is two guys like me and Owen, two guys who look like me and Owen being models. Yeah. And I remember thinking like, well, first of all, like, give me a break, Stiller. Right. Like, look at your body. Right, you like. I know you are a Jew, but you have an Adonis body on you right now in this movie. And the Owen Wilson thing is like which of these two guys are like less attractive? To me, it's Owen Wilson. Like, that nose is insane. Owen Wilson is handsome enough to be a model because he is such a good actor that he sells it. Yes. And he has to. Like, Derek Zoolander can play it like as big as he wants and could be a send up of the modeling engineer, send up a fucking Blue Steel and Magnum, whatever it is. Like, that's the game. But to me, this movie is The Prestige, where on one side you have a magician and on the other side you have a guy who has figured out magic. And that's the thing. Like, Hansel comes in, it's like, oh my God, you figured out magic. Yeah. Oh my God. So I do. I adore this movie and adore his magical performance.
I adore it as well. I mean, it's my number 2. It's Adam's number 1. What's your number 2, Adam?
Bottle Rocket.
Interesting. I don't have Bottle Rocket on.
I did have a hard time picking my Wes Anderson. I purposely was like, I'm not going to put 2 Wes Anderson movies on the list, even though
me too. I guess Phil too.
Wes Anderson movies. But so Bottle Rocket I went with, but it just as easily could have been Steve Zissou.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I kind of went out of my way to not put 2 Wes movies on here as well. I mean, Royal Tenenbaums is my number 1. I think he's wonderful in it. All I ever wanted to be was a Tenenbaum. He also just, I mean, one of the best Owen Wilson lines ever, which is everyone knows that Custer died at Little Big Rock, but what if this book presupposes what if he didn't? Yeah, I mean, it's really it's just great. He's just in another level in Royal Tenenbaums.
I have my 2 and 1.
But can we put that quote on the box for Kenny's Cut of Minus Man?
Yes.
What did this presuppose? So I have my 2 and my 1. So my 1 is also Royal Tenenbaums. Okay. I'll talk about that in a second. My 2 is Meet the Parents, which, like, I assume you guys didn't pick because he doesn't have a big enough role, but like he also makes that movie. Yeah. Like, he does make that movie. He does. Fucking funny in that. It adds a different element to it. So I love him in that. But Royal Tenenbaums is so cool because there are probably 7 or 8 actors in that movie. If you were to give me the top 5 Danny Glovers, the top 10 Gene Hackmans, the top 5 Gwyneth Paltrow's, they would be Stiller, and Stiller. Oh, I'm telling you, go down the list of this cast because I love this movie so deeply because it really does feel like an ensemble in a way that every one of them feels like it is their film. Yep. I don't feel bad putting Owen Wilson, who was probably 6 or 7 billed in this movie, wasn't even a Tenenbaum, number 1 on the Owen Wilson films, and I don't think he'd be upset about it either.
Yep. He has 2 shots in the trailer. I went and watched the trailer. I was like, could I pick Royal Tenenbaums? Could I pick this? And I was like, let me go watch the trailer again. And he has 2 shots in the trailer. I was like, I don't know if I can pick it as an Owen Wilson movie. But like literally, it was on my list. I crossed it out, replaced it with Bottle Rocket. I crossed that out, replaced it with Life Aquatic. I crossed it out again when Bottle Rocket. It's a toss up there.
I do want to say just something. You know, I know we went into this because I texted Kenny and was like, we should do a top 5 Owen Wilson, right? And he was like, I never really thought of him as a top 5 guy, but he kind of is. So maybe we should, right? And I think we all feel the same way, but this conversation has led me to believe that Owen Wilson's one of our greatest actors. He's really fucking bringing something. Even when his movies aren't good, I think that Owen Wilson has a something that's entirely his own.
He's been mishandled. That's what I think at the end of the day, that he's been mishandled. Yeah. One thing I kind of felt when I was doing this exercise is I would have had an easier time with the top 5 Luke Wilson, which seems weird. but I think I would have.
That's fair.
Tenenbaum's number one, of course, but I think he's so good in that.
He's so good in that.
I love him so much.
That movie is just perfect.
Old School would go on that list right away.
Yeah, Old School, Idiocracy. I mean,
you know what would be on there too, Kenny, is Blue Streak. Your favorite.
Blue Streak, he was so good and made that movie. No, that is did I give that like best supporting actor or something with that year? Yeah, it was the right call. Oh, that's a good one. Let me do my
Luke Wilson.
My Luke. All right. So what are we doing next week while I get some Luke in here?
Well, next week we're doing. I'm going to do one of the episodes that I did by myself. I did a music episode with a friend of mine. I brought on my friend Scott Casuccia. We talked about Nine Inch Nails' album "The Fragile," which came out in 1999. It has the inauspicious or dubious achievement of being the album that had the largest drop on the Billboard charts in the history of albums, from first to like 30th or something like that within a matter of a week. It's now regarded as an underrated masterpiece, which I think that it is. But so I spoke with Scott, who's a really big Nine Inch Nails fan, about that. So that's what we're doing next week. But more than anything, Adam, thank you so much for coming on here to talk about The Minus Man with us. There's no one else we could have done this with.
I think real fast. I mean, I think Luke Wilson's a real Wes Anderson quandary.
Sure.
Because if you're only going to pick one, do you pick Tenenbaums or do you pick Rushmore? Because he's so central to both of those films.
I mean, he has one of the best moments in Rushmore. Are they?
And then the other movie that would be on the 5 is Legally Blonde. So. Sure, he does, to me, have more good movies than this brother.
He might have. I'll say this. I think that Luke Wilson never became or has not become a leading man to the same degree that his brother did. So his brother had more of a minefield to navigate in terms of the career that was either he was attempting or was being sculpted for him, which gave Luke Wilson the freedom to be able to do a bunch of different things that are all more perhaps interesting than an I Spy reboot. With
I like Luke's career. I think he has a nice career. Yeah. I loved him in Enlightened too. Like I think his shit's great.
Oh, he's great in Enlightened. He's fantastic.
He's good in Charlie's Angels too, as well.
He is good in Charlie's Angels as well. Yeah,
he plays good. He plays good. He's like he's got that Kyle Chandler quality. Just like good, just like coming out of his veins.
Yeah. He's one of the best things in Roadies.
In Old School, Old School only works because he's there, right? Because you so feel for him, right? Both of these guys have that quality where both Owen and Luke, like you love them just by them being them. And in some sense, that for this movie, for Minus Man, it works against the movie.
Great names too. That my youngest son was going to be Owen or Luke. I'd never even put it together. He's Luke. Luke 1, just like in real life.
Well, Adam, again, thank you so much for being here. We really do appreciate it. We hope that you'll come back in the future for something else.
Yes. Is there a movie less known than this one? Let's do it.
Oh, we got a bunch of them.
Is there? I don't know.
I think so.
You wanted
Well, thank you.
You wanted to do just the ticket with Andy Garcia?
Huh. I didn't know that would exist.
$12 million budget. It made like $400,000.
Insane.
I'm into it.
Well, thank you again, Adam. We really appreciate it.